Now on? Yes. Perfect. Hello and welcome. My name is Christina O'Donnell. I'm the head of the Family Policy Unit at the Centre for Social Justice. And today, with UNICEF UK, we are delighted to be hosting a very timely discussion. The theme is Best Start, how to support family and children through the cost of living crisis. Now, we have a stellar panel to shed light on this important issue. We have Anna Firth, the Conservative MP for Southend West since 2020. And she is a member of the Education Select Committee, which she told me we are not stooges of the government. We hold them to account.
Correct.
And she founded in 2020 the Invicta National Academy, which was a free online live lessons platform in order to help children and young people catch up during lockdown. We have Dame Rachel D'Souza, the Children's Commissioner for England and Wales, a role that allows her to regularly hold the government's feet to the fire, which I understand is something she relishes. We have Anne, who has just launched The Big Ambition, a campaign to listen to children and young people directly and see what they think government can do for them. We have Gillian Popkins, the Deputy Director of UNICEF UK's program of advocacy program and safeguarding. And we have Denise Burke, who has been in the sector for over 30 years. She is also working with the DFE on their holiday activities and food program. She is also the CEO of a Dutch childcare business, and I am sure will share with us some Dutch courage later on. Now, the CSJ, like UNICEF UK, focuses on the most disadvantaged families. We know that it is their children who have been most affected by the cost of living crisis. Successive lockdowns have magnified the attainment gap between these children and their wealthier peers. In fact, so much so that by the age of 3, that attainment gap between the haves and have-nots is a year and a half. This is certainly a social injustice, and we look to our panelists to see whether policy changes can make a difference and give all children the best start in life. Anna, if we start with you, and everybody has, each panelist will have a few minutes in which to set out their vision, set out their stall, and then we will ask a couple of pointed questions of each panelist, and then we'll open it up to our audience for more general questions. Anna.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much indeed for inviting me to this absolutely crucial discussion. And I don't think we should just be talking about the early years in terms of the cost of living crisis. I think that the early years warrants discussion in its own right. And I say that both from a personal and from a professional perspective, because before having children, I was a medical negligence barrister, which I did very happily for over a decade. Was pretty good at my job, was doing pretty well, and sort of thought that, parenting would be easy. Why not? I'd, gone to law school, learnt all that. That seemed fine. Nothing prepares you at all for parenting and the challenges that it brings with you. And it doesn't matter how many of those antenatal classes you go to where you all lie on the floor and talk about things and imagine childbirth, because actually childbirth isn't the problem. It's after. It's after child. Well, okay, yeah, that's possibly pushing my case, but it's after childbirth when we need the support. One of the things that I did when I was at home, because I was very lucky, I took a career break when I had number 2. 1 was fine, number 2 became more problematic, number 3, you're outvoted. And I set up a parenting cafe in Sevenoaks where I was living. And the numbers just went up and up and up. And we started inviting, speakers to come and talk to us about attachment theory. It was quite, academic in parts, but also just about how to deal with troubling behaviour and education and nurseries and all sorts of things. And it made me realise that clearly this advice and this support isn't out there in a way which parents want to engage with it. And that led me into the whole issue of starting to look at the early years and the importance of it. And forgive me if I, wow you with 1 or 2 statistics, because I think these statistics are just so important. You'll all be aware, I'm sure, of a recent study conducted by the Early Intervention Foundation in 2016. So going back a bit, but I'm sure this picture will have got worse, not better. The cost to our economy of late intervention is about £17 billion a year. Just let that sink in. I mean, we argue about whether we should be spending 11 or 12 billion pounds on overseas aid. We are spending 50% more than that by getting things wrong in the early stages. And almost a third of that is the cost of looked after children. So the children in our country that have some of the worst outcomes are those which are removed from their families and taken into care. We are spending billions of pounds in the early years achieving very, very poor outcomes. And you will also be aware of the evidence of the Nobel laureate, James Heckman, who has shown that every pound invested in early years education delivers a return on that investment of £13 per pound in better grades, better jobs, and better mental health. It is a no-brainer that we should be putting early years right at the heart of our economic policy, our education policy, and our social policy in this country. And one of the pieces of work that we're now doing on the Education Select Committee is to look at, well, we've just done it actually, a study of school absence. And part of that has been looking at mental health. And that has found that, according to a recent NHS survey, 1 in 5 children are now suffering from a probable mental disorder. Yet again, this is the result of not putting enough support in early. The more that we can support children in the first 1,000 days of their life, the more we will prevent these sorts of problems obviously coming up later on. And the question is about, the government. Well, I think the government does accept this, but certainly we've got fantastic work going on. Dame Andrea Leadsom, as you all know, has done a fantastic piece of work on the first 1,000 days of children's life. Now, some people criticise the government's policy on childcare, but I would say that actually supporting childcare is absolutely key if we're going to tackle the attainment gap. We know that 2/5 of the total attainment gap between 16-year-olds in families from the bottom 5th income level and those from the top 5th is already present by the age of 5. So we have to go back to supporting families to be giving children maximum input before the age of 5. We know the brain is most plastic at that point. We know interventions at that point will have the best outcome. So we have to go back, which is why obviously high quality childcare is absolutely crucial. Yes, of course, it does support parents to work, but more importantly, it is supporting all children to be able to flourish, because we are allowing children to be in environments where they are with trained professionals and childcare experts who will be providing those early interventions, which are so key to cognitive development. So I would say that the government is focused on the early years. That we're also focused on special needs, and as you all know, there's been a £300 million package, Start for Life and Family Hubs programme. That builds on work done by the Centre of Social Justice in their landmark report many years ago now, but it was such a landmark report, that Breakdown Britain report. Family hubs, I mean, this is not rocket science, is it? You know, we've been around this boy several times, and it just makes complete sense to put as many services in one place as you can. Sure Start was another programme that was very successful. So I'm actually very pleased to see that, in a way, we are going back to some policies that have been proved to be successful in the past, and we're backing them again with, you know, with a huge programme. We're putting some support in to reducing parental conflict, whether that's a £3.6 million programme. Which of course is, you know, obviously an important area to focus on. So I would say that there's a lot more that we can do in this space, but I would say that the government does accept the importance of this. I would certainly say that on the Education Select Committee, we're focused on it, but I'm here to listen and to take as many of your points back to my work as I possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And now, Rachel?
Thank you. So I think we have made huge strides in understanding the importance of early years in the last 20 years. And there's been a huge expansion of childcare, increase in parental leave, and rollout of the first children's centres and family hubs. But I want to talk about something a bit different today. I want to talk about the importance of the family. And that is something that has just... I went out and did an independent family review for Kemi Badenoch for the government. So I had the privilege of talking across the country and nationally representatives of surveys, but also speaking to families, to children, all right across the country. And some of the interesting things they told me, well, the two things they were most concerned about, families we spoke to, were cost of childcare and cost of living. Not surprising at the time. When I talked to them about family and what it meant to them, because I didn't want to go and say, you know, family should be this, shouldn't it? I wanted to ask our nation, what did they think family was? And their answer was, what does family mean to me? It means love, it means support, it means mum, dad, grandma, granddad, the lady down the road who we respect so much, we call her auntie. It was such a broad and beautiful vision of family. But not only that, we also managed to establish in that family review just how important the protective effect of family is. So when we looked at people's well-being, and we looked at massive study on this. We did a huge study on this, and the data's all in the report. We absolutely could show that your well-being was so much greater if you could rely on your family, and that this was, you know, an absolute source of happiness right across social groups, right across financial. And it sounds so trite and obvious, but this is what, you know, our nation are saying, and we need to be listening to it politically. 78% of people in a nationally representative survey told me that basically if they had a problem, the first place they turned to is family, and after that, friends, you know, and definitely, you know, if it was services, they wanted the services to be local, feel familial, and be long-term. So I think it's absolutely fascinating when we talk about family breakdown. And trust me, you know, the figures are genuine. You know, the marriage rate is going down, and it's whereas cohabiting is fairly, over the last 10, 20 years, fairly similar. One of the most frightening things that I found, we looked at the millennial cohort studies and the 20-year studies of children, 25, you know, since 2000. 40% of children born in 2000, when in their entire childhood, did not live their entire childhood with both of their parents And many of them, 40% of them were there was a real lack of stability that is not caught in the census. And I think when we have to really take these things in the round when we're looking at solutions, because it's absolutely clear that being able to rely on your family, having a stable family, however that family is made up, whatever that looks like, is absolutely critical to children's happiness. And in my Big Ask survey, 500,000, largest survey in England, 500,000 children responded. You were 9 times more likely to be unhappy if you had instability in your family. Right, and I think we need to just start talking about the protective effect of family and how important it is, and how government, how all of us can support it. And I'm not saying we have to go back to some sort of model where it's very rigid and you can't get out of a marriage if you've been beaten or anything like that. I'm not to trivialise it. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is just how important family is, whatever that family makeup is, and it's that and they're done in very different ways. And, interestingly, as part of the family review, for me, I looked into the data around single parenting and around parenting styles. I mean, in terms of, first on parenting styles, really didn't matter if you were super trad or you were, hey, I'm your dad, call me George. It didn't matter. What mattered was boundaries and actually consistency. And I thought came out of the data very strongly. And actually, as an educator of 32 years, I was a head teacher, whatever, that's exactly what I say as well. Real schools are in different ways, but everyone needs to understand to get the boundaries and be able to function within them. I also just want to address on the issue of single parenting. So I come from Scunthorpe. Scunthorpe, I'm a steelworker's daughter. I've got 4 brothers, and Scunthorpe is one of the cold spots for single parenting. And as are a few cold spots, it's very different around the country. And now I'm not talking about people who've got married, and it's not worked out, or they've been partners, not worked out, got divorced. There's lots of different contexts. I'm talking about young girls who decide to just have a baby and their partner is not involved at all. These are the girls, Scunthorpe is so important to me because I went to school there, and now we're seeing generations on of this. And when we looked hard into it and the why, and why that's a life choice. And I mean, I cannot, Knowsley, Scunthorpe, about 7 or 8 points around the country. And I just think we need to do so much more in education this is me as a former head teacher, in teaching our girls that there are better life choices. And I want to see Michael Gove genuinely levelling up these places so that young men can have jobs and form families, I'm unashamedly, want to, I think every child deserves as much family as they could jolly well have and as well functioning as possible. So I'm totally supportive of that. The other thing I thought was quite interesting that came from the family review, and it relates to this in terms of our early years, because I'm talking around the wider things, is when I asked families who they trusted, who do you trust? What institutions do you trust? It was school and it was GPs, which I think is fascinating. So again, when we look at that early help offer, I think there's something, the messages I would say, if we're going to really give our kids a great start, and make sure that we can close the disadvantage gap, and we need to make sure we really support the family, whatever shape and size the family is, to make sure if people need help, it's non-stigmatized, it's local, it's familial, it's caring, and it's long-term. I think we need to utilize this GPs and schools in terms of, I've seen a number of really good family hubs, community hubs in schools. We've got falling roles. It's an absolute win-win to start actually taking some of those places and turning them into that. I've got a problem as Children's Commissioner. I've got 1.8 million children who are persistently absent. I've got 100,000 plus who are just out there at risk of criminal exploitation, aren't in a school at all. And I'm thinking those heroes in those community hubs and family hubs are actually the people who can bring these children back into school. Those families are not going to be engaging directly with school. We know that who they engage with is the community worker who actually brings them something and they trust and they have that long-term relationship with. So in many ways, I think I've just tried to give you a perspective to support exactly what Anna was saying there. And on Krish's point, and this is I was thinking of Krish, it wasn't Krish's point, it was Anna's point about children in care, but I was looking at Krish Kandiah there and thinking about his stellar work both as a foster carer and as someone who has worked so hard on the Homes for Ukraine system. And I think we need to be looking at the British public and looking at their generosity in terms of how they open their homes and made those connections, brought people in, and thinking about our children in care and our young mothers, who might not have the support around them, and the people in need, and thinking how can we be the forever people in our communities for babies, children, young families, for children in care, and also be the corporate aunts. This room is full of people who could be corporate aunts and uncles and corporate grandparents. We can all do it. So I think if we're going to give kids the best start, I guess I'm saying family, community, services that feel real and local and are non-stigmatising. And I think the family hubs are great. So.
Music to my ears. Gillian.
Hi. Thank you very much, first of all, to the Centre for Social Justice for partnering with UNICEF for the second year in a row. It's really a pleasure to be joining distinguished colleagues on the panel to talk about how to give children the best start in life. And we're talking about it in the context of some of the most pressing challenges for at least a generation. So it's a very important discussion, and thank you for joining us today. For about 50 years, UNICEF has been working to advocate for lasting change for children. In the UK, we reach about 2.5 million children every year through the hospitals where they're born, through the schools where they learn, and in the communities where they grow up and hopefully thrive. And here in Manchester, about half of schools are working to become rights-respecting schools accredited, and all the maternity services are engaged with the Baby Friendly Initiative. Manchester's a candidate to become a child-friendly city and community, to be recognised under that initiative. So it is really fantastic to be speaking to you here in Manchester, and myself and colleagues would be really happy to connect with any local government authorities to talk about partnering after the panel today. In addition to engaging with children through those initiatives through the course of childhood, for the past couple of years we've been very focused on early childhood as well. It's a period that's often overlooked by policy frameworks because of the nature of early childhood happening in the family, as colleagues have said. And the interventions that we know have an exponential impact on outcomes, not just in childhood, but then throughout life, are really, really important to put at the centre of policy agendas. They range from good physical health to being able to build strong social relationships and resilience to, of course, the earnings and work opportunities that others have also mentioned already on this panel. So despite early childhood being such a critical time in any person's development, we launched a report last year that showed that support and services available to families ranging from maternity services, health visiting, infant feeding support, support for mental health, and indeed special needs and disability are patchy and they're getting worse. And that's why we've launched our Early Moments Matter campaign, which is calling for a baby and toddler guarantee, building on what's there to ensure that all babies and toddlers, regardless of where they're born and who they are, get the support they need to thrive. We were delighted that over 66,000 members of the public and countless experts and organisations supported the campaign, and we submitted a petition to Number 10 last month in an effort to keep putting this important phase of childhood on the national policy agenda. We're also focusing on poverty and inequality in early childhood and trying to raise the profile of those policies which can protect babies and younger children from the impacts of poverty. We know that poverty limits choices and opportunity at any point in a child's life, but it is uniquely harmful to babies and toddlers in all aspects of their physical, cognitive, social and emotional development. It's undermining. So throughout the campaign that we ran, parents and carers were saying to us that the cost of living and financial strain is the biggest challenge that they currently face. We ran an opinion poll with YouGov, and 78% of parents and carers with children under 5 told us that they feel the cost of living crisis is negatively impacting family life in the last year. And that's up 12% from 2022. And they also told us that children are missing out as a result through the choices that they're having to make. And access to we're calling for access to a high quality suite of support services in early childhood, because we know they can mitigate the immediate and the long-term impact of poverty and ensure that that's not passed down into the next generation. We support the Government Start for Life initiative. It covers the most deprived local authorities, and it's an excellent starting point. We want to make sure that those services are actually there for every child, and to see long-term sustainable investment and better outreach and better connection between the existing quality services and filling the gaps of services and making sure that people get access to those services, because we know again that the poorest families are those that are the least likely to access what's there. In order to be serious about tackling poverty in early childhood, we are asking for targeted financial support as well as that package of services. Social security policies such as the Healthy Start scheme need to be available to all parents on universal credit, and they need to be uplifted in line with inflation if they're to do the job that they're intended. And we're also calling for reconsideration of the 2-child limit on universal credit and associated benefits as well. Now, I know that everyone in this room and on this panel shares a vision for the best start in life for every child in the UK. This is such an important issue. I'm really excited for the discussion that we're going to have on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. And Denise.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I feel as though over the years, I mean, this is going to show my age, but I have done the rounds. I was there at the start of the National Childcare Strategy way back in 98, and we seem to have been talking about these issues since then. We have now an incredibly complicated early years and childcare system in this country, with multiple bolt-on initiatives, some of which are welcomed by parents and carers, some of which make it incredibly difficult for providers of childcare. And then we have this plethora of different funding streams which do not seem to attach to each other. But the biggest challenge of having a complicated system is that parent journey. Where do parents find out the information from the day dot of when that child is born, what they're going to be entitled to? Is there an incentive for them to think about going back into the workplace? And if they're not going back into the workplace, what early years is on offer for them? So we have to simplify the offer. We have to simplify the offer to parents and the funding streams, bring them all together. I think it's wonderful, huge advocate of family hubs, but we've been there before. It feels so deja vu. We've had mentioned the Sure Start centres. Many of these centres have disappeared. As funding was reduced, local authorities no longer see them as a priority. And then what we're trying to do is reinvent the wheel with family hubs. So I think, we've been there, we've done some of this. What I would really, really ask for is now we start looking at some sort of cross-party working on the whole early years and childcare. And really have the involvement of the sector. We cannot lose the fact that 80%, over 80% actually, of the early years and childcare provision in this country is delivered in the private sector. That private sector, quite rightly, it's there to make profits, does not want to work in disadvantaged areas. So we're left with the voluntary sector picking up the pieces, and they are literally going from hand to mouth. It cannot continue. So what I really want to see is a little bit more joined upness and some really strong, let's forget politics, let's just do some cross-working on the whole topic.
Thank you very much, Denise. And I'm just going to be a little bit defensive of family hubs. They're not Sure Start centres, and the reason they're not is because they grow from the grassroots up rather than be imposed by central government on local authorities. They do also deliver a host of services through signposting. So, Denise? rap on the knuckles. But Gillian, I was so interested in what you said about the early years initiatives and how important services are at that stage. Health visitors, is that part of your vision? Because in terms of those trusted figures that get to walk into a home, even among the most hard-to-reach families, health visitors are absolutely at the top. They're trusted, they're popular, and they come at the right moment when usually both parents are invested and want to learn. Anything that UNICEF UK has in terms of health visitors, a vision for their services?
Yes, so health visiting and face-to-face access, so actually meeting and building a relationship with a health visitor is part of the package of services that we're calling for under the baby and toddler guarantee. We know that during lockdown, a lot of health workers were repurposed and meetings went online. We know that services are not kind of back to normal following COVID, so that was one area of concern that came out of our survey with parents and carers. So yes, it's very important. But I think what we wanted to stress really is it's the whole package of those services that's needed on a predictable, financed basis that's available universally to every family. So what we were seeing at the moment is it's quite patchy. It's a bit, it's difficult to kind of generalize because different groups of parents and parents living in different areas, it's a bit of a lottery what access they get to those services, and we'd like those services to be universally available for every child as a package. And we think one of the ways of achieving that, as my colleague has already said, is by having cross-government, cross-party support and increasing accountability. So understanding what a good outcome looks like and making sure that we're joined up in making sure that bits of government and bits of the local authority and central government are well aligned and coordinated to make sure it all works easy and simply for families to access.
Thank you. Anna, the two-child benefit cap, is the Education Select Committee looking at that and just in wondering how it can be that given our demographic trends, this is something that is still on the books?
Yeah, well, the answer is no, we're not specifically looking for that, but looking at it at the moment, but I'm quite sure we will be shortly, because you make a very, very valid point that, with an aging demographic and, a huge reduction in childbirth, it doesn't actually make sense. We need to be encouraging family formation in this country, not discouraging it. That's just, fundamental, I'm afraid. None of us are getting any younger. And we're all going to be relying on somebody to be looking after us. And we all want those surgeons in our hospitals to be brilliantly trained and to be available.
And not on strike.
And certainly not on strike. If I could just come back to my plug, I realise it's slightly off topic, but we know that there is a fall-off in children being school ready. Andy Burnham was talking only last night about how school readiness is plummeting right here in Manchester. And the knock-on effect of children not being school ready is that obviously those are the children who quite often will then not be attending school. And so this study that we've recently been doing on the Education Select Committee is, I find it absolutely shocking. You would have thought that when we came out of the pandemic, that there would be a massive focus on getting our children back into school, because boy, had they suffered. I'm sure I'm not the only parent in this room who's got children who missed key parts of their education through being at home. They miss school, they miss all the traditional things, the sports days, the plays, whether they're in them or not. But so the award ceremonies, all of the sports that normally go on in the summer months. So many of these things, which are so good for children's mental health and social skills, were just lost completely. So you would have thought there'd be a massive push to get children back into school. It's not happening. We've now got 2% of children in this country severely absent. That means they're missing more than 50%. 50% of their school days. I don't know if you remember, I remember when I was young and at school, and I got so stressed when I was ill because I knew I'd have to catch up. I hated being ill because of the catching up. Imagine missing 50% of your schooling. That's doubled, basically. And we now have a quarter of children who are what is called persistently absent. So they're missing 10% of their schooling. This is an absolute educational crisis. And we've got to address it. And we've put some recommendations forward. Attendance monitors is working in the parts of the country that have them. So we want that to be nationally rolled out.
Can I just blow our trumpet? Who mentioned attendance monitors in their report on the ghost children
Yes.
of lockdown?
The ghost children, that's such an important report. And that brings me on to my final point, which is the attendance register. It is so shocking. I think when I last looked at this, which was when I was doing Invicta National Academy, we had about 60,000 children off roll, and we've got no idea where these children are. We've got no idea what circumstances they're in, and we've got no idea what education they're receiving. This could be a safeguarding scandal. And the Education Committee has called for the government to legislate for an attendance register, and we really want to see this in the King's Speech. So please, as you're going around this conference, please keep up the call for an attendance register for our children.
Thank you for giving us your marching orders. Rachel, you talked about schools as a really important, familiar locality. It's a setting that parents feel comfortable with and where they would just naturally access services. Is that the only way of improving access to services for the under fives?
So it's a fascinating question. One of the things we looked at in the family review was where parents found information about local services. We asked that question. And we also looked at every single LA website because they have a responsibility for sharing this information about local services, and we found them sorely lacking. Basically. So when we asked parents where did they go to for info of the under fives, it was again friends, family, school gate, outside the nursery. That's who they trusted. That's where to go. So again, I think that family hubs model or school early years model is the place that the conversations that are happening there in the surgery, in the school, at the nursery gate, at the school gate is really important for access. And we've made a number of recommendations about what can be done about that and how the LAs can improve that. I do think we are at quite a unique time. We've got falling school rolls. So we've got many of our primary school buildings now with empty space. It seems to me, if I was making decisions about this, I'd be rocket boosting childminding. Get rid of Ofsted looking at it. Have proper childminding hubs that have got that local safeguarding knowledge of what's going on and can support childminders. I'd be investing heavily into early years education. Why? Because early years education is the one thing we know impacts high quality early years education as opposed to childminding actually impacts on outcomes at 16 and 18 like nothing else. We actually have the evidence. So I think there's a number of really practical things we can do, and I'd be putting community hubs, childminding hubs. I'd be having my health visitors in to local places. And never underestimate the simple. The voluntary groups running running the babies groups, the toddlers groups. That's where, when I was a young mum, I might have been a teacher, this and that, but when I became a mum, my goodness, I didn't really know what to do or who to go to. And it was the local community centre where I'd go for the baby play 10 till 2, which truthfully is mummy's sanity, isn't it? It's how you find everything out. So I think there's so much we can do. We don't need to overthink it. We just need to be it's really simple, but we need to do it. And actually, I'd like to see the LAs kind of just recognise that it's local, familial relationship that makes things happen and devolve even further into their local community places and wrap around those GPs, community centres and schools.
Denise, I was so intrigued to read about your experience in the Netherlands, and I just wondered what lessons do they have for us?
Well, I think there are some good learning, but equally I wouldn't necessarily want to adopt the whole Dutch model. I mean, the good thing about the Dutch model for early years and childcare is that parents know from the outset exactly what they're going to be entitled to. There is not a mishmash of funding as we have here in the UK. I mean, I think just for one example, the piece of work that I am doing at the moment on the increasing the take-up of tax-free childcare, you know, what do parents think about something that has the word tax in it, that sits over with HMRC, when actually we're doing something that is about early years that sits in DFE? So I think that just sort of emphasises the confusion to parents. In the Netherlands, everything is very easily very easy to find out. You know exactly what any childcare subsidy, early years subsidy, you're going to get based on your income. The only bit of the Dutch model I would not want to go down is that what we have here is a much cleaner expectation and a more robust quality assurance on all of our early years provision, and certainly on our staff to child ratios. So for that part, I would rather leave that in the Netherlands, but we have lots of learning to take from the Netherlands on the whole funding. And just to go back to a point that Rachel spoke about on information to parents, you know, every local authority has a statutory requirement not to just offer a family information service, but also to undertake on an annual basis a childcare, early years and childcare sufficiency assessment, so that at least we know, have they got the number of places available in the areas that parents need them. And I have to say, local authorities are lacking.
And didn't you say, Denise, when we were talking earlier, that the DFE is going to now make some kind of change on that they're going to ask, they're going to require LAs to make this assessment?
Well, they are already required to make that assessment, but I think the pressure is now coming down, because the issue is going to be, while we've got this fabulous announcement on the expansion of hours and funding going forward that's going to be phased in over the next 2 years, the big issue is, you know, do we know if local authorities have actually got sufficient places in the areas that it's going to be needed? But equally, we also now know that we're going to have a huge staffing shortage. So we're going to have no places, no practitioners to actually work in the area. So that sufficiency assessment is absolutely key, that it's undertaken at local authority level.
Thank you, Denise. Now, questions from the floor. Shot right up. And you're standing next to the microphone. So
How convenient. Joss McDonald from the Food Foundation. Anna, you talked about the Education Select Committee report, and one of the recommendations in that was reviewing eligibility for free school meals. Yeah. We know that 900,000 children, primary school children in England, I think, are living in poverty and don't have access to free school meals because the eligibility hasn't been changed since 2015, I think it is. So I'd be interested to hear the panel's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely, we did make that recommendation, you know, for very good reasons, because if children have not got a full stomach, they are not going to learn. And you know, I'm a big supporter of breakfast clubs. Free school meals at lunchtime is very, very important, but actually, I would be in favour of all schools providing cereal and milk at the beginning of the day, so that every child who comes to school should be have had something to eat. Obviously, many won't need it. Great, but we need to make sure that children have are not hungry. They are not going to learn if they are hungry, and that's just that would be a very, very cheap investment, but a very significant one for the education of our children. But linked to that point about the free school meals is what we found was that there was a link between food-based interventions and attendance. It's sort of obvious, isn't it? You're providing an incentive, and the HAF programs do that, supremely well in the holidays, which we made that point as well. So yeah, totally agree with you.
Denise, I think you're an expert on this because you're working with the DFE on their holiday activities and food program.
I am, and I think that's coming back. I mean, I manage just over 33 of the local authorities that are delivering HAF, and that same thing keeps coming up time and time again, because while they have obviously got large cohorts of eligible benefit-related free school meal children, there are swathes of children that sit just beyond that. And yes, there is some wiggle room with HAF. They can use up to 15% of their budgets to target, if you like, other vulnerable children. But that vulnerable list now is growing and growing and growing. So I would like to see that upper limit on the eligibility being increased.
Good. Another question, Matt Buttery from Triple P.
Thanks so much, Christina. Thank you for the comments about family, particularly Rachel for recognising family. I mean, I think the funding for family hubs is really welcome. I guess I'm asking, are we going far enough, fast enough? We know that evidence-based parenting programmes can have a significant impact. I think the same study that you were quoting there about childcare also talked about the quality of the home learning environment and how that also can mitigate against some of the impacts of poverty that exist within families. I know in Australia they've taken an approach where the federal government have commissioned universal access to digital evidence-based parenting programmes. I know Helen Lincoln, the DCS from Essex, recently commented about having a digital early help service that we need to sort of help manage the pressure on early help in local authorities. I wondered, do you think we should be making family hubs national now rather than waiting and trying to influence it to go into a manifesto? But B, should we be also thinking about a national digital service as well to support families immediately? I say that as someone who's rolling out Triple P for Baby as part of the Start for Life commissioned by NHS Education for England face-to-face. So I'm not discounting the importance of the face-to-face delivery of these interventions, but I just wonder whether digital expands reach, access, and deals with the geographical issues that we've got.
Rachel?
So I think the digital, I know your programmes, Matt, and I think the digital idea is really, really important. I think parenting programmes, I've looked at parenting programmes across the country. I think one of the really important things about whether it's digital or in person is that it's universal. And I just want to sort of say this, we're talking about vulnerable families, poor families, absolutely critical. But when I talk to any adults, professional adult women, the first thing they'll say to me is, I found being a new mum incredibly hard. And actually, when I've been to see supporting families or other parenting programs, you've got mums there who you're sort of from vulnerable families, but also teachers on mat leave, a range of women who need to learn about how to do this very, very difficult thing, because the natural community support that would have been in, when our mothers and grandmothers were growing up with Auntie down the road and it's not there. So I think digital is incredibly helpful. I think for building community, local and universal is incredibly helpful, because actually, what do we want? We want people who've chosen to become parents to have the support of each other and some professional input to build community and bring the children up together. That's really absolutely ideal. I do think we should be scaling up family hubs. I think it's a no-brainer. I think we should not obsess about buildings. I think there's too much obsession about let's have it on a separate building, let's have a capital budget. Let's get into the buildings, whether it's community, community halls, schools, get where people go and do it there. Partner with the voluntary sector. Those voluntary heroes are amazing, but make sure there's state money there as well, because what is more important than our children? Who are more important to support than our parents and our families? You know, it's like so obvious. And often this debate becomes children. We're going to do this for children, or we're going to do this for parents and working parents. And actually, we should be doing it for families, because children do not see themselves as separate from their family. And actually, that is the unit, you know, in which we should be looking. And again, to the point around taxation and that, I think we should be being much more bold. I'm looking at countries around Europe doing supporting families in amazing ways in terms of income tax breaks, so having far longer parental leave, you know, and allowing people to come back to jobs, and they're seeing demographic turnarounds. So, you know, if we really want to put our money where our mouth is, we should be supporting families. And actually, at Conservative Party conference, I'm absolutely shocked the Conservatives aren't talking about it more, because they would always have styled themselves as the party of family. And I think that is, you know, absolutely, and the party of parents, and, you know, supporting that. So I wanted to see and hear more of that on the conference stage.
Aye. Gillian.
Thank you. Yes, I talked earlier about the fact that we're calling for increased accountability and a cross-government strategy for early childhood. So it won't surprise you that, you know, we're calling for universal services, and that, you know, expanding what's there already and making it available so that we don't have such patchy access for parents is really important. But I think it's important to point out that at the moment we don't really know how many services each local authority is providing. So having a kind of understanding of what's there and where the gaps are, and making sure that we've got accountability through outcomes being measured, as well as, you know, providing services and making sure they're there, is really, really important. So the family hubs are a start, but they're not enough. And as we take this bottom-up approach, we also need the top-down scaffolding and the very sustainable funding where local authorities are not able to provide those services. Let's understand why not. Let's make sure they're not making impossible choices between different services in the most, particularly in the most deprived communities, and consider that it, you know, the rights of children to social security and to all services, and the duty of government at all level to provide those where there are gaps.
Thank you. David Goodhart.
David Goodhart, Policy Exchange, channeling my inner Miriam Coates.
Kate,
sorry.
but go ahead and channel.
This extension to childcare, £4 billion is being spent on it. I think 60,000 women will be going to work as a result. It won't begin to pay for itself. There's a pretty broad consensus that significant exposure to formal childcare for children under 1 is not good for them. It's meant to be starting at 9 months. What the hell are we doing that for? And also, why on earth are we not giving that money to mothers so they can decide whether they want to stay at home, whether they can, enabling them to stay at home before their children are too old, or paying granny, or indeed giving it to a formal childcare? Why are we not giving it directly to families? Ridiculous, we don't.
Thank you for mincing your words as usual. Anna.
Well, I understand you know, where you're coming from, and you know, instinctively I'm in favour of parental choice, obviously, but on the other hand, there are families where actually the children getting the children into a warm and safe environment with a childminder or an early years educator is going to actually be the best thing for them. Having said that, I totally understand your concern about sort of factory nurseries, which I would hate to see, and we do have some of those in this country, which I've been to, and I think those sorts of places are horrendous. But what I would like to see, and is more childminders. I totally agree that they should not be Ofsted registered, and Ofsted should not be getting involved. We have driven 10,000 childminders out of the sector.
Yeah.
And one of the things I got involved in, after the Parenting Cafe, I then got involved in taking on the Early Years Foundation Stage Framework not because I disagree with the principle of us having standards at nursery education, but because it was way too heavy and way too clunky and inappropriate for childminders to be having to comply with all that form filling. And that's why we drove so many out of the sector. My mum was a teacher. I'm sure my brother and I, we were both with Auntie Doreen. I remember, but he was probably even younger. He may well have been, 12 months or whatever it was. But Auntie Doreen became a member of the family. And I don't think there's anything wrong with Auntie Doreen's. And that's the sort of extension of childcare that I'd like to be supporting.
Rachel?
So just on a personal note in response, my son's 28 now, but when I was, had my lovely teaching career, but when I had my son, you would not have got me back to work and to miss his first few years, for anything. And what we did, we basically moved in with my in-laws and we took the financial hit, and then I went back to work at 5 for school hours, and luckily, because of my career, was able to have a terrific, stellar sponsored academy principal career very quickly afterwards. Nothing would have driven me back, and certainly not in those few months. But I think I've got many friends and women I know who wanted to go back. So I think there are lots of ways we can support those women and support around them to make sure that the childcare is right. One of the things I did when I ran a trust of 14 schools in Norfolk and Suffolk was, when I had a young female principal who wanted to have a baby, we'd talk it through, and I built nurseries. We put nurseries on the schools so that they could breastfeed and be with the baby regular days. It was worth it for me, for that head teacher who I could not replace. And I think the child-minded case, lots has been said that's good, but I think one of the reasons I wanted that Ofsted the Ofsted talons off it and start to locally look at it is because so many women maybe have a sister-in-law, a friend down the road who said, I'll take the baby, I know you need to go back to work, we'll bring ours up together. And it's enabling those local community sort of decisions that really are, based on love, which is what children need. Now, of course we need professional childcare, and any woman has the right and should be supported to go back to work, and absolutely legislation. But if they want to not, then we need to support them too. And we need to think how we support them.
Denise?
I just want to remind everybody that expansion on the 30 hours is, you've got to be in work anyway. It's not necessarily going to hit and support those very disadvantaged families, so we mustn't lose that. But equally, I can't honestly see it happening. And the reason I can't see it happening is I talk to a lot of nurseries, and the whole idea of having the space to expand on their baby rooms for they don't know how many, or it may not be any, additional babies under 2s going into that space. I have to tell you that most childcare providers feel very negatively about this. They simply can't see it happening. So that's from the coalface.
And Gillian?
Yes, I guess maybe to go back a little bit to what we were talking about in the last question as well, in terms of parenting and parenting programs, and also just bring in the evidence of the critical importance of fathers in the early years of babies' lives as well, and that we need to make sure that we are not forgetting to mention the dads. Yeah. I have a daughter, two wonderful girls, one of whom lives with complex disabilities, and her dad is her primary carer. And so, making sure that the support services and the interventions are there for men to be involved in their upbringing as well is really critical, and sometimes that means mum being the breadwinner, as is the case for us. So I just wanted to make sure we bring those gender equality issues into that, because it's so important for girls to see women as role models as they grow up through life, and that starts in the early years as well. So just add that.
But also for boys to see, fathers
that as well,
as their male role models.
Exactly.
One last question.
Thank you.
Wait.
I'm not part of any organisation, but I am
That's fine.
a grandmother of 4 early years children, and also have had a career in education, including being an early years inspector. But what you were saying about the girls in Scunthorpe was the example.
Not all
Lo-
girls in Scotland.
No, not all girls. But the type of girl of low self-esteem who sees having a baby as a solution to problems. How would you go about addressing this?
Go for it, Rachel.
Okay, so in a multifaceted way, because it's a complex problem and a complex issue. And I think for me, there's an education piece that is about raising self-esteem and ensuring that that a girl can see and understand her choices in terms of careers, education. I think that there's something key there. But I also think there's an economic issue about young men actually being able to have jobs that will allow them to be partners, with a girl with a job or not a job, and be able to actually sustain a family. And I think there's, for too long it's been, and I've taken on schools where I've been talking to kids and talking to their parents, and the mum will have said, well, I had the baby and then I got my flat, and because I got my flat and then I'll get married later on maybe, and there's and it's just like, how have we got to a situation where those life choices seem like the best, because these women are acting from absolute goodwill and good faith. They're not trying to do something bad to their children. So I think there's something about education. There's something about ensuring. I was so excited when I saw the Levelling Up agenda, and I wanted it to be partnered with a family agenda. We need our these coal spot areas. Scunthorpe was a place where everybody used to be employed. They'd be employed in the steelworks, and everybody could afford a family, and everybody could do that. And to watch that disintegrate with a whole load of other social disintegrations, and then to see the poverty that these young women and children have been brought up in, breaks my heart as someone from there. So I think we need an economic agenda, a levelling up agenda, but also a family agenda and an education agenda. There's not a word of criticism about those choices. It's just life is so hard. When I look at the outcomes of this, that I think we need to be, helping. Not been lily fingered about it. Oh, it's okay. It's really tough.
I love the thought of Rachel ever being lily-fingered about anything. Time's up. We want government to deliver a simpler, less expensive, more accessible childcare and early years system, and we want to become forever people for those who need their children to be raised, and we want to support them. So thank you to my panel, thank you to my fantastic audience. It's a wrap.